The shackle on Caleb's ankle was cold and heavy. He leaned against the concrete wall, his eyes adjusting to the dim light, cataloging the space. The entire chamber was a network of steel cages, a grim honeycomb imprisoning 2 people per cell. A man stood in the central corridor, his voice echoing off the damp walls as he delivered a passionate, spit-flecked sermon. He told the assembled captives that their sponsors, in a grand show of mercy, were offering a prize. Survival in the gauntlet meant a full pardon, a clean slate as a citizen. It was, he proclaimed, the opportunity of a lifetime. The whole speech felt unhinged. Caleb shifted his weight and glanced at the man sharing his cage. A scent, faint but distinct, prickled at his senses. Pheromones. An omega. The smell was intense, uncontrolled, a clear sign that a heat cycle was beginning. Caleb's brow furrowed. He looked again at the figure huddled in the corner, arms wrapped tightly around his knees, face buried. The man's body trembled violently, a portrait of weakness and misery. Yet the scent grew stronger, a clean, sharp fragrance like rain-soaked clover and lime, and it was dangerously appealing. It made the glands at the back of Caleb's neck ache with a low, insistent heat. Outside the bars, the speaker was winding down his pitch, savoring the conclusion. He added, with a theatrical flourish, that such a tempting reward naturally came with a catch. A notorious killer, codenamed Winter, was hidden among them. The task was simple: stay alive to win. Winter's task was simpler: kill everyone else. Caleb raised a hand, cutting through the man's rhetoric. He asked if there were any suppressants available, explaining that an omega in the cell seemed to be going into heat. The speaker shot him a bizarre look, then broke into a dry, rasping laugh. He apologized for his oversight, for forgetting to mention the built-in perks. He called it a beautiful design. Each cage housed 1 alpha and 1 omega. A perfect pairing, he sneered, allowing for a little relaxation amidst the thrilling competition. He assured them the cages were specially designed to contain all pheromones and provide privacy. If an unfortunate heat cycle should occur, the pair could simply enjoy a few days off from the games. Of course, he noted, if the omega became pregnant, both would be disqualified. Caleb interrupted him again, his voice flat. He just wanted to know if they had suppressants. As the speaker had said, the cage was sealed. The clover and lime scent was a naked provocation in the enclosed space. Caleb took several deep breaths, fighting the tremor in his own body. His physical response was becoming a problem. He had chosen the role of a frail alpha, incapable of self-defense. He had no idea what this omega was capable of, especially in the grips of a heat cycle, but he feared being torn apart. The speaker's lips stretched into a wide grin. He leaned down, his face level with Caleb's through the bars, but didn't answer the question. He simply wished Caleb a pleasant meal. With that, he slapped the iron bars. Heavy steel shutters descended on all 4 sides of the cell block, plunging the world into absolute blackness. Caleb hugged himself, retreating to the corner diagonally opposite the other man. He repeated a silent mantra, a plea to his own self-control, digging his fingers into his thighs to keep his mind sharp. The sound of strained breathing grew louder in the oppressive dark, punctuated by muffled gasps. Time lost all meaning, but Caleb could feel the sound inching closer. There was only one thing to do. He feigned sleep, shutting his eyes and forcing his own breathing into a slow, even rhythm. A slender, cool hand touched his arm. Hot breath ghosted across his ear. A soft, weak voice whispered that his heart was beating too fast for someone who was asleep. A jolt went through Caleb's body. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic, uncontrollable drum. He had a desperate urge to shove the man away, but the other moved first, his grip tightening on Caleb's wrist with a sudden, shocking strength, like a clamp forged from steel. Caleb was completely immobilized. The voice came again, laced with a sob. He was in so much pain, he whispered. He pleaded for Caleb's help. Caleb knew he was trapped. The man leaned against his shoulder, and the scent of clover and lime became intoxicatingly thick. The whisper returned, a desperate plea for Caleb to just bite him, just once. In the darkness, Caleb imagined a pale neck, offered up and vulnerable, a picture of total submission. He ground his back teeth together as the voice continued its demonic temptation. He bit the inside of his own cheek hard. The sharp pain and the coppery taste of blood cleared his head for a fraction of a second. But he was already moving, his hands on the man's shoulders, his nose nearly brushing against the glands of his neck, fangs aching to emerge. The man's arms were a loose band around his waist, his head buried in Caleb's chest like a docile lamb. Caleb pushed him back a little, mumbling that he needed to take his shirt off. The other man said nothing, but Caleb sensed a flicker of something violent in his pheromones, a fleeting, razor-sharp edge that vanished as quickly as it appeared. He ignored it, pulling his t-shirt over his head. He twisted the fabric into a rope and asked if the man would be okay with being restrained. A quiet affirmation was his only reply. Working by feel in the darkness, Caleb brought the man's wrists together and wound the shirt tightly around them, securing it with a series of stubborn knots. Then he staggered to his feet, using the wall for support, and moved as far away as he could. When his body and mind reached their breaking point, he slammed his head into the concrete wall. His last conscious thought was a frantic scream inside his own skull, that he was a weakling and he shouldn't hit himself hard enough to cause permanent damage. The pheromones in the air faltered, carrying a note of pure shock from their source. When he regained consciousness, the shutters were raised. Sunlight streamed through the bars, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. A faint, lingering scent of clover and lime hung in the cell. A voice called out to him, asking if he was awake. Caleb followed the sound. He finally saw the Omega's face clearly. Soft black hair fell across a delicate forehead, framing features that were exquisitely carved. The gentle lines of his face made him look like a beautiful, harmless art piece. Caleb sat up, rubbing the dull ache in his head, and managed a small sound of assent. The Omega smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. He held up his still-bound wrists and asked if Caleb had forgotten something. Caleb hissed through his teeth, his face a mask of apology. He was sorry, he said, promising to untie him right away. He moved across the cell and knelt, fumbling with the knotted shirt. He wondered aloud how he'd managed to tie it so tightly. He picked at the main knot, gritting his teeth, but couldn't make it budge. The Omega's gaze was fixed on his face. He spoke as if they were just making small talk. His name was Liam, he offered, and he asked for Caleb's. Caleb told him. Liam remarked that Caleb was quite the Boy Scout, wasn't he? He'd never met an alpha who would rather knock himself unconscious than compromise an Omega's honor. He bit down on the words Boy Scout with a strange emphasis, then gave a light laugh and asked what Caleb had been thinking at that moment. Caleb just shrugged it off with a lie, saying he was thinking that a man's best asset was his dignity. Liam's smile flickered. He nodded thoughtfully. Finally, the knot came loose. Caleb let out a breath of relief, shook out his shirt, and pulled it on. He looked around the block and was startled to see that many of the other cells were now empty. A lot of people must have died during the 2 days he was unconscious. He sat down next to Liam, deciding to probe for information. He asked Liam if he was strong. Liam lowered his head, his profile appearing even more docile. He said he was very weak. Caleb slapped his own thigh as if he'd found a kindred spirit. He confessed that he was weak too, and suggested they stick together for protection. Liam turned his head to look at him, considering it for a moment. Then suddenly he reached out and wrapped his arms around Caleb. He agreed that they should stick together. Caleb sighed, patting the other man's arm helplessly. When Liam didn't move, Caleb gave in and returned the embrace. After a moment, he put his hands on Liam's shoulders and gently pushed him back. He said that 2 weaklings like them needed to come up with a serious plan. Liam just stared at him, seemingly lost in thought. He said, out of nowhere, that Caleb smelled good. His pheromones were incredible, Caleb instinctively touched the glands on his neck, suddenly remembering the systems. A fatal attraction to everyone. Fatal attraction. He saw a predatory glint in Liam's eyes and his stomach dropped. The warden had said a pair in a heat cycle could skip the competition. It was the only known way to avoid the fights. But Caleb didn't know when his own rut would be. Liam proposed a solution. Caleb could use his pheromones to induce an early heat in him. It was risky, since Liam's cycle had just passed, but it was a plan. Caleb felt a massive headache coming on, envisioning a future of inducing Liam's heat, knocking himself out, waking up, and repeating the cycle endlessly. Liam then clarified that he wouldn't actually be in heat, just faking it. It wouldn't overwhelm Caleb. After all, he pointed out, even a man of steel couldn't endure a constant heat cycle, let alone a delicate omega like himself. But, he added, faking it would require a steady supply of Caleb's soothing pheromones. He looked at Caleb with wide, shining eyes, asking if that would be okay. Caleb felt he had no choice. Liam was already doing most of the work to help them avoid the gauntlet. He couldn't refuse. He thumped his chest and promised it was no problem, that he could handle it. He had no idea what he was agreeing to. He lay sprawled on the floor, utterly drained, looking up at a very satisfied Liam. He pleaded that he was completely empty, that he didn't have a single drop of pheromones left. Liam pouted for a second before his dutiful, considerate expression returned. He told Caleb he had worked hard and should rest for a while before they continued. Caleb wanted to weep. He would have preferred knocking himself out. The speaker visited their cell several times, his initial curiosity turning to grudging respect, and finally to a stone-faced expression that silently screamed his admiration for their scheme. They made it to the final round. Everyone else had become food for the beasts in the gauntlet. The entire cell block was empty except for them. Caleb felt like he'd aged a decade. His body was a testament to the dangers of overexertion. He was so weak his legs trembled, and he had to use the wall for support when he walked. The speaker announced a change in the rules. The final would be a one-on-one duel. The survivor would walk free. He saw Caleb and Liam huddled together and paused. A cold sneer twisted his lips. He asked if they really felt such loyalty to each other even now. An alpha and an omega. The outcome seemed obvious. But then his eyes fixed on Liam. He wondered aloud just how far Winter was willing to take this act. Would he really sacrifice his own life to let the other man leave? He grunted again, then turned and walked away. Caleb froze for several seconds before turning to Liam in disbelief. He asked if he was Winter, the killer, the final boss of this whole nightmare. Liam's eyelids fluttered. He looked up, his eyes glistening with unshed tears, looking as if he might break down at any moment. He asked if Caleb really suspected him. Seeing that heart-wrenching expression, Caleb's resolve softened. A new doubt crept in. Maybe he was Winter. He had no memory of his life before arriving here. Maybe he was the monster hiding in plain sight. As he spiraled into self-doubt, a hand took his fingers tracing patterns on his skin. Liam insisted that he believed in Caleb. He claimed the warden was just trying to drive them apart, that the whole story about Winter was a lie. He stared at Caleb, his gaze intense and sincere, and added that Caleb wouldn't abandon him. Would he? Caleb reached out and touched his head, ruffling the soft hair. He squeezed Liam's cheek gently. "Of course not," he said with a smile. He assured Liam that he would be the one to leave this place. No matter who Winter was, Caleb knew he couldn't win a fight against anyone. Through the bars, he looked toward the sunlight, feeling a strange sense of relief that Liam would escape this hell. Liam hugged his waist tightly, burying his face in Caleb's shoulder and inhaling deeply with a sigh of satisfaction. After a long moment, as if making a monumental decision, he spoke slowly. He told Caleb that when he got out, he had to wait for him. Otherwise, he would be very angry, and Caleb would not want to know or experience the consequences of his anger. The next day, Just as the sky began to lighten, the speaker returned with guards. A playful smile was on his lips as his eyes darted between Caleb and Liam. He announced that the show was about to begin and asked if Winter was ready. He said, incredibly excited. Caleb took a step forward, about to speak, but Liam had already moved behind him. In a flash of silver, a pair of handcuffs clicked shut, locking Caleb's wrist to the steel bars of the cage. As Caleb stared in utter shock, Liam walked over to the speaker. The speaker clapped his hands and laughed. He declared it was a fascinating turn of events, a decision on who to save and who to sacrifice. It was so unlike Winter, he mused. Liam cut him off with a sharp command to shut up and take him to see the man in charge. He seemed afraid Caleb would hear the name, and he avoided Caleb's gaze. He started walking, and the guards outside parted like he was the plague, not daring to block his path. Caleb rattled the handcuffs against the bars, shouting after him, demanding to know what he was doing. Liam stopped and turned, his face arranged into the same innocent, gentle smile he wore when they were close. He said he was going to negotiate with their boss. If he succeeded, someone would come with a key to let Caleb out. He told Caleb to remember to wait. Otherwise, he would be very sad and very, very angry. Then he left without another look back, the guards trailing behind him, leaving Caleb alone with the speaker. The man gave Caleb a long, meaningful look. He chuckled, telling Caleb he was impressive, far more useful than the other captives. But he posed a question. If Liam was really willing to stay for him, did Caleb truly believe he could just walk away? He called Caleb the lever that controlled him, a worthless grunt who held the leash. The money Liam could make for them in one match could buy 1,000 men like Caleb. If Caleb could control him properly, the speaker mused, he wouldn't mind letting him live a comfortable life. Caleb's lips moved, his voice barely a whisper. The speaker leaned closer, trying to hear. Caleb spat directly in his face. For the first time in his life, he laughed with wild abandon. He called the man and all his kind vermin, a cancer on society, and told them to wait for divine retribution. He cursed them relentlessly. The speaker just calmly wiped the spit from his face, a murderous rage churning in his eyes. He wished Caleb good luck. Someone came with a key and unlocked the cuffs. Caleb was led out of that hellhole. The speaker personally escorted him to the gate and handed him the digital contract that had bound him. His expression was an unreadable mix of contempt and admiration. He smiled. He told Caleb to pray that Winter behaved himself, dear citizen. He spat the word citizen as if he wanted to chew it up and swallow it. Caleb didn't reply. Following his promise to Liam, he found a job at a flower shop not far from the compound and settled in. The owner was a sweet beta woman who was flustered at the idea of hiring an alpha. During their first meeting, she kept her distance, nervously offering him water, her eyes shy like a startled deer. He thought she was cute, then immediately thought Liam would be cuter. He worked in the shop, and at night he pushed 2 chairs together to sleep. Every day during his break, he would walk along the high walls of the Gauntlet compound, hoping for any scrap of news. There was nothing. The owner often saw him staring into space behind the counter and finally asked if he was thinking about his Omega. He froze, unsure how to answer. What was his relationship with Liam? Took him a long time to find the answer. He supposed he was fond of Liam. Not deeply in love, but fond. And Liam was fond of him even if it was just the pheromones talking. So one sunny afternoon, he personally arranged a bouquet of flowers and left it at the base of the Gauntlet's wall. He made a silent promise that if Liam got out, he would try to have a real relationship with him. If it worked out, they would get married. But trouble always comes unexpectedly. One day, a group of unwelcome visitors stormed the shop. They were all alphas, and they let their pheromones flood the small space, scaring off the customers. The leader was a mountain of muscle with a baseball bat slung over his shoulder. A cigarette dangled from his lips. He swaggered in and demanded to see the lady of the house. Caleb watched him warily, asking what he wanted with the owner. His hand was hidden below the counter, hovering over his phone, ready to call the police. The man snorted dismissively, yanked Caleb out from behind the counter, and tossed his phone to one of his goons. He announced that he was about to become the new owner of the shop, and he was asking for the owner's wife. He was looking for the owner. It was clear he'd been rejected by her and was here to save face by force. Caleb squared his shoulders, meeting the man's aggressive stare. He said he didn't know what the man was talking about and told him to leave if he wasn't buying flowers. The man shoved him impatiently, cursing at him to get out of the way. Caleb stumbled backward and fell. The man's followers swarmed into the small shop, searching everywhere, showing no care for the plants. They maliciously snapped flower heads and broke stems. Caleb tried to stand up and stop them, but he was tossed around like a rag doll, completely powerless. They left only when the shop was a total wreck. Caleb hung the closed sign on the door and swept up the dirt and broken petals, sighing heavily. What a mess. The owner hid for a few days. When she returned, the first thing she did was rush to Caleb, her face alight with excitement. She told him that the thugs had been beaten up. Rumor was their leader was still in the hospital, unable to even stand. He had sent someone to apologize to her and promised never to cause trouble again. Apparently, the person who beat him up had insisted on it. She heard it was an Omega, a very strong and beautiful Omega. Caleb's heart skipped a beat. Liam's smiling face flashed in his mind, and he couldn't help but smile too. He asked the owner, who was still chattering her thanks to the mysterious benefactor, if she knew what he looked like. She didn't, but she wished she could meet him. It seemed her wish was granted. That night, a huge explosion rocked the area from the direction of the gauntlet. The ground trembled. Caleb and the owner scrambled to move the flower pots inside and lock up. But when they turned, they saw a slender young man standing inside the shop. His normally neat black hair was slightly messy. A smile played on his lips, revealing 2 small dimples. He was twirling a set of keys around his finger, glittering in the bright lights. He was stunningly beautiful. He asked Caleb if he wanted to play a thrilling game of chase. Caleb's heart hammered in his chest, feeling as if that smile had shot an arrow straight through him. He nodded, completely bewitched, and said he just needed to pack. Liam's gaze followed him, hot and intense. The owner looked at him timidly and asked who he was. Liam seemed to notice her for the first time. He made a small sound but didn't answer her question, just smiled and said he hoped that getting that alpha to back off meant she hadn't been bothered again. The owner gasped, covering her mouth, and thanked him profusely. Liam waved it off, his eyes returning to Caleb. He said he was the one who should be thankful for giving Caleb a stable job so he could focus on dealing with the gauntlet. The owner took a moment to process this, her eyes widening as she connected the explosion with the man in front of her. She rushed to the cash register and pulled out stacks of bills. She told Caleb that since he was leaving, she had to pay him his wages. Caleb looked down at the money, estimating it was about 6 months' worth of salary, and tried to refuse. He had only worked for a few days. She forcefully stuffed the cash into his backpack. Then, as if remembering something, she pulled a box of suppressants and a pack of scent blockers from under the counter and threw them in as well, zipping the bag shut. She stood with her hands on her hips, her chin up, her cheeks puffing out. She declared that he was her first employee, and a good boss couldn't let their people be mistreated. Besides, she was rich. She told him she really liked him, and if he ever had the chance, he should come back and work for her again. At the first part of her statement, Liam shot the owner a cool glance. Then he pulled Caleb over and carefully helped him put on a helmet. Caleb used the moment to pledge his loyalty to the owner, solemnly promising that in his next life, he would work for her again. Liam made a clicking sound with his tongue, his voice laced with mock grievance. He pinched Caleb's cheeks gently, complaining that Caleb hadn't even promised him a next life yet, but was already giving it away to someone else. He grabbed the backpack with one hand and took Caleb's hand with the other, leading him out the back door to a motorcycle. He swung a leg over and sat down. Caleb said goodbye to the owner and got on behind him. The engine roared to life, the bike vibrating. With a cry of "Hold on tight, Caleb!" from Liam, they shot forward. The owner shouted after them, asking them to send a picture of their baby if they ever had one, because she wanted to see how beautiful a child from two handsome people would be. The journey wasn't as dangerous as Caleb had imagined. He asked Liam how he got out. Liam explained that he had earned enough money for the rich sponsors, so they allowed him some freedom. He hadn't dared to approach Caleb directly for fear of causing trouble, so he had scouted the area and planned their escape route. On the day of the plan, he sabotaged the central control system, releasing all the captives and beasts. Then, amidst the chaos, he set off an explosion in the kitchens and cut the power, blowing the main gates open. The priority for the Gauntlet staff was to appease the wealthy patrons they couldn't afford to offend. Capturing the escapees was a secondary concern. It wasn't even capturing, really. They just shot a few to make an example and control the chaos. As for the beasts, the staff had gone through hell to capture them alive in the first place. But Liam had already made deals with some of the staff. People naturally follow a crowd. When a few brave souls made a break for it, the rest followed, and the situation spiraled out of control. In the mayhem, Liam stole a motorcycle belonging to some rich kid and came for Caleb. He added with a grin that he also doused their armory, food storage, and several other rooms with gasoline and set them on fire. He sounded like a proud kitten recounting his triumphs, his head held high, his eyes shining, begging for praise. Caleb rubbed his head and told him he did a great job. Several pursuit teams from the Gauntlet came after them, but Liam either outmaneuvered or dispatched them with chilling efficiency. Caleb couldn't help much, other than being ready to run at a moment's notice and trying not to be a burden. Liam took him to a small coastal town where it seemed the Gauntlet had given up their pursuit. The town was quiet, its people mostly betas. Caleb never imagined he would end up living a peaceful, domestic life with Liam. The only difficulty was that things like suppressants were impossible to find. Life flowed on calmly. One day, Caleb felt sluggish and out of sorts. His rut was starting. Liam wasn't home. Caleb pulled out his backpack to find his suppressants, but after turning it inside out, he couldn't find them, though he was sure he had 2 vials left. A wave of heat washed over him. His pheromones began to leak out, uncontrolled. He gritted his teeth, locked the doors and windows, and went to Liam's room to search. The rising tide of instinct made him tremble. After half an hour of fruitless searching, a second, more powerful wave of heat hit him, and he collapsed backward. With his last bit of willpower, he put on a bite guard and curled up on the bed, whimpering in agony. When Liam opened the door, the first thing he must have noticed was the sweet, overwhelming scent of Caleb's pheromones. He came into the room, took off his shoes, and got onto the bed. He held Caleb, whispering softly, asking if his rut had started. Caleb forced his eyes open and saw Liam's own eyes were filled with a triumphant smile. His voice was muffled by the guard as he confirmed it. He asked Liam to help him to his own room. But Liam didn't move. His warm breath fanned across Caleb's neck. Caleb saw him staring at a spot on his throat, licking his lips in anticipation. Caleb instinctively tried to pull back. Liam pulled him closer, pouting in dissatisfaction, asking why he was trying to get away. His gaze was predatory, unblinking. He pinned Caleb with one hand, and before Caleb could speak, he leaned down and sank his teeth into the soft flesh of his neck. The scent blocker on Liam's own glands had been torn off at some point, and the delicate fragrance of clover and lime filled Caleb's senses. Caleb hissed in pain, pushing against Liam's chest to stop him. Liam captured his wrists and pinned them above his head. He whispered Caleb's name, his voice husky with arousal. He toyed with Caleb's earlobe, then removed the bite guard that was restraining him. He offered his own pale neck, an invitation to a feast, a shared fall from grace. The scent of clover and lime was destroying his reason. Caleb's fangs emerged involuntarily. All he had to do was lower his head to taste paradise, to mark his omega. He fought it, biting his own tongue again to find a sliver of clarity. He asked Liam, his voice strained, if he knew what he was doing. Liam was smiling. He knew. His breath hitched as he spoke against Caleb's chest. He had bitten Caleb, so it was only fair that Caleb bite him back. Caleb protested. He said that if he marked him now, there would be no going back. He reminded Liam that he was a weak alpha, unable to protect him, that in fact he was the one who needed protection. He listed all his own failings. Liam made a sound of annoyance, then silenced him with a kiss, prying his lips open and swallowing all his arguments. When they finally broke apart, Caleb was gasping for air. Liam just laughed. He said that after all that, it sounded like Caleb just didn't want to mark him. He didn't want to hear logic. Since Caleb wouldn't mark him, he declared, then he would just have to be the one to mark Caleb for life. The bed frame groaned. In the end, Caleb was the one crying as he finally bit down on Liam's glands, completing the temporary bond. But Liam didn't keep his word. The ordeal lasted from day to night, and from night until the sky brightened again. 3 days later, when the rut had passed, Liam resorted to his usual tactics. He knelt before Caleb, buried his face in his lap, and whimpered an apology. He said he was wrong, that he was just desperate because Caleb had been sleeping in a separate room for 2 weeks. He begged for forgiveness. Caleb turned his head away, pointedly ignoring him while secretly rubbing his aching back and hips. It really hurt. He was determined not to let this go with just a cute apology, or his future would be miserable. Seeing that he was being ignored, Liam started nuzzling against him insistently. He pleaded that he really knew he was wrong, and asked Caleb to forgive him just this once. Caleb snorted, his face a stern mask. He asked what would happen next time. Liam looked up at him, then quickly looked down again, testing the waters. He said next time he would let Caleb be on top. Caleb was incredulous. He pointed out that he was already on top. He had never heard of an alpha being on the bottom. Liam pouted, muttering that in that case, he wouldn't let him be on top next time. Caleb was speechless. Realizing he could never win, he surrendered completely. From that day on, he was the one on the bottom. Liam tugged on his sleeve, his eyes alight with post-coital satisfaction. He told Caleb he had to take responsibility and asked when they were getting married. Caleb retorted that shouldn't Liam be the one taking responsibility for him? Liam rubbed his chin. That worked too, he conceded. So, since he was taking responsibility, when did Caleb want to get married? Caleb told him to wait until he had fully recovered. His back was killing him. Liam's eyes lit up, and his hands started wandering. He offered to give Caleb a massage. Caleb yelped, asking him just where he thought he was touching. A year and a half later, I ran into my mysterious Omega benefactor again. He had apparently just blown up the gauntlet and needed me to buy him a batch of suppressants and scent blockers before he rushed back. Before leaving, he handed me a photo. In it, Caleb was holding a newborn, his expression soft and gentle. My benefactor was next to him, also holding a baby. One was wrapped in blue, the other in pink. Twins, I guessed. I was silent for a moment, then gave him a thumbs up. I remarked that Caleb was more formidable than he looked and asked if he'd given my benefactor a hard time. Liam, already straddling his motorcycle, paused. He laughed and said that while he was the one who gave birth, Caleb was the one who cried. Then he sped off, leaving me completely baffled. Another year passed. Liam returned, having apparently blown up the gauntlet for good this time. He handed me another photo. The 2 toddlers were there, along with Caleb, who was holding another infant. Liam wasn't in the picture this time. Caleb had the exhausted but increasingly gentle and loving look of a new dad. I praised him again, marveling that he was so potent, 3 kids in 2 years. Liam didn't deny it, just said with a relaxed air that he had good stamina. Suddenly, his gaze shifted. I followed his eyes to a beta on the street corner, trying to solicit customers. I asked who that was. I explained that with the gauntlet going under, a lot of the betas who worked there had been let go and sold to the red light district. The rich folks didn't want them, so they ended up in the poor part of town. I wondered why they were trying to find clients so far out. Liam asked what the red light district was. I hesitated, then told him it was a brothel, and asked if he knew the man. Liam smiled. Of course he did. A man who loved to lecture, who lived his life behind a mask. I asked if he was going to save him. Liam shrugged. He said no, he was happy knowing the man was miserable. He took off, but not before waving at the man. The former speaker looked like he'd seen a ghost, cowering and hiding his face, only to receive a sharp lash from the madam standing beside him. The third year, the gauntlet was officially a ruin. After 3 major explosions and a full-scale captive rebellion, it had lost all its patrons and closed down. The crumbling walls were left to decay. If it weren't for the homeless people using it for shelter, it would have been a complete wasteland, just waiting for the city to demolish it. So when Liam came, there was nothing left to blow up. He still handed me a photo. I didn't even look at the picture. I just asked in shock if they'd had another one. For in 3 years? 5? I asked how he could handle it. Liam shook his head. He was just showing me an update on Caleb and the kids. They were planning to move back, and he wanted to ask if I could help look after the children sometimes. I finally looked at the photo. The toddlers were bigger. The little girl's pigtails were crooked, and she was crying into her hands. Caleb was trying to comfort her, while Liam was wielding something that looked like a ruler, about to smack the little boy. Another child was sitting on the floor, laughing and showing off 2 baby teeth. I looked from the photo back to Liam and teased that maybe the reason they hadn't had any more children was that there was no gauntlet left to blow up. Liam nodded, then shook his head. No, he said, it's because Caleb can't take it anymore. Otherwise, he thought they could have another daughter. I was silent. Then it hit me. A light bulb went on. I asked excitedly if they were reversed. Liam gave me a look that said, "You're just now figuring this out?" and drove away. A whole new world had just opened up for me. I turned and shouted to the alpha who was busy working inside my flower shop. "Honey, I have a very bold idea.